Okay, welcome everyone to the second annual. We decided it's going to be annual. We just decided that 5 minutes ago. The second annual Teach reading. All of our readers tonight are, to me, superheroes. They're holding down one of the most challenging jobs in the world, while also making creative marks on the literary landscape, which is super impressive and inspiring to me. My name is Donna Vorreyer. I am a writer and a retired middle school teacher, and I'm honored to be hosting all of these talented people tonight. So the way the reading is going to go is we'll have three featured readers who will each read a little bit longer, and then we will have a host of other wonderful poets who follow them. As each one reads, I will be putting their biographies and their websites and their links to their books in the chat. So please have your chat open so you can follow along with that. And I encourage you to use the chat and your emojis and all those little things to encourage the readers, to leave comments for them. I often go back and look at the chat transcript afterwards and send people little highlights, because sometimes while you're reading, you don't get to see what people are saying. I hope you will support all of these poets by buying their books, by visiting their websites and finding their poems online. It means more to them than you know. And I know that each of our readers tonight will leave you wanting more. You're going to want to find out more about their work and more about their poems. So we are going to start off the festivities this evening with our first featured reader, who is Jared Beloff. Jared, it's all yours.
Thank you for having me and hosting. It's really great. I'm glad that we've decided today that this is going to be annual because it's really fun, and I'm really happy to be here. So in 2023, I'm going to have a book coming out called Who Will Cradle Your Head? It is about climate change and parenting, and the first couple of poems I'm going to read are from that. And the first one is called The Bird Collector, which was published in Night Heron Barks last month. So here we go. The Bird Collector. Last summer's pulse nudged the tide, noticeable as salt graining the seawall. But the mangroves are pulling back, their roots like frayed brooms holding on to detritus. Spoonbills, gangly and roseate, have already left Biscayne Bay for higher ground. Somehow this hasn't registered as a fact we can grieve. It is my job to collect the dead that circle Miami's mirrored light, black-throated warblers lit by a night shine, northern parulas searching out a distant home. Each bird crashes dreaming of a windowed horizon, not realizing the sea and its dotted green is already behind them. Everyone here is looking for more space and time. A group of warblers is called a confusion. Spoonbills are called a bowl. I lay them out in lines like ruffled silver, a tide of feathers, a confusion of bodies, their mouths clattered open in search of food, a name lilting their small tongues. They stare out as if wondering which species is called a drawerful. So this next poem takes after a poem that I teach often. I love teaching imagery, and Ted Kuzer is amazing at it. And he has this poem called The Abandoned Farmhouse, which is all these little images that lead to deductions about it. And I wanted to turn it on its head. And so this poem is called Restoration. Restoration. The rooms were vacant, says the broken glass and tattered curtains in the farmhouse windows. Inviting, too, says the burrowed length of the beds in each drafty room. And a good, well-loved home, says the pellets and peels next to the Bible torn and broken below the window, brushed by sun. But not for all, say the prints laid in the dust, leading to the door and the tall grass beyond. Desire is the slope down the back of hills along the horizon, said the glacier sliding like a hand, tracing each boulder-freckled field. Longing the only measure of time, say the holes tapped into the door's frame by searching birds before a cold winter. Loneliness lays like snowfall, or the puddles melt, says the spray of mud left at the narrow threshold. Yet, something wrong is set right, says the roots that buckle the boards. The fuzz of moss, sugaring pulp, and dust say there is nothing to return to. The cellar filled with dendrites, each splintered side, every pipe spidered with rust, plow broken, the field blossoming seed, an understory. Something, they say, set right. So after finishing a very long time of writing climate depressing poems, I wanted to try to do something a little more fun. And Joan tweeted something randomly like, only a New Englander would wait in line for such bad coffee and donuts, and meaning Dunkin' Donuts. And so I started writing poems about famous New Englanders waiting in line for Dunkin' Donuts, and then it spread to all types of poets. And so this is the first one I ever wrote. It's called Elizabeth Bishop Dreams of Moose While Waiting at the Drive-Thru. It is cold this morning. The field beside us curbed by frost, crystals of muted color, refracted light growing with the sun's rise. Our taillights flicker an inch closer to the window. A woman orders her coffee, a bag of sugar, butter stains already seeping across a white bag, hints of smeared jelly. From here, I can just make out the creases of a smile as she grabs the bag. Imagine the crinkle of sturdy paper, the roll of it between the pads of her fingertips. Somewhere further back in line, a horn honks like ovals of geese, bobbing softly beyond us to find a grassy field. My eyes are shut. I see them gathering, their necks slow undulation, long sighs, an old conversation. They are unconcerned with interruption. So at first, they do not recognize the calf, still ruddy with its first fur, looming at the edge of the wood, curious, listening to their chatter, sniffing the dried thistles at its feet. It's all right now to dream of something dim and sweet, otherworldly, the air now thick with morning. This one was specifically requested. It is a Sylvia Plath sits at the high-backed booth. Nobody in the room, only coffee wisping above the table, mugs on either side, though mine is cooling mostly. Breakfast, 2 donuts, a glass of milk, and a conversation somewhere at the end. A smile picks its way through your teeth. I feel the skin of my legs press the chair, hard and dumb. It is barely morning. You note the great orange face reflected in the windows across the street, but your eyes look out at nothing. Steam climbs the steep path between them. Jam oozes where we have bitten. I smell the sugared feast, twitch like bees, believing the smoke that calms them is a god to mold them. A swarm of sweetness sent to complicate me one last time. So I'm going to finish out with a couple of poems from another project that I'm returning to and building on. I really love writing about artwork. So I'm working on something where people are walking through an art museum and seeing famous paintings and connecting to them, reading them, close reading them. So this first one was published in Barron about a year ago. It's called The Ray, based on Chardin's The Ray. Chardin pulls our eyes to its translucent skin, announcing its wound, pink and gaping, spilling, a brutal lack of symbolism. A kitten tiptoes a harried arch through oysters, their jellied muscles exposed, its face pinched back from what might be revealed. A cloth covers the knife's edge like a flap of skin. The ray's mouth might be screaming. But our eyes continue upward to the glint and curve of the hook, the string taut with suggested weight, the ray held not in crucifixion, but arranged as if it were swimming toward the surface to drown once more. Okay, so this last one, I'm gonna actually post a link. It is based on a, not a painting, but a sped up, or actually really slowed down photography, 1,600 frames per second of a famous painting called Quince, Cabbage, Melon, and Cucumber by Khotan, and he actually shoots bullets through all these arranged fruit. And so I thought that was really fascinating. And here is a YouTube clip of that happening. And this poem is an ekphrasis of that. It's called Pomegranate. I decided to use a pomegranate instead of a quince because a pomegranate would explode like a grenade or a geshert. In our hands, a many-seeded fruit, a body's pallid weight, torn, the bullet already beyond the frame. Even at 1,600 frames per second, we are still looking for exit wounds. The spill of rubied teeth exploding toward the lens, one line's cathartic pull across another, until all that is left is the rind's tense vermilion sway over a head held in prayer. A seed rots, the cucumber's green, and the melon's weeping. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jared, so much. I love that we got to hear from 3 different projects. And again, let's all recognize how incredible that is, that there are 3 different projects happening while Jared is teaching. So looking forward to the book coming out next year, and then also more donut poems and more art poems. Our second reader for tonight is Melissa Fite Johnson. Melissa, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this. This is just so affirming, as always, to be here with people who share 2 different passions, at least, maybe more. So I'm going to start with a couple of teaching poems. And so this first one is called My New Red Boots Lace Up, but Have a Sneaky Zipper. I wear them with dresses to school, like Claire Danes in My So-Called Life, which I rewatched recently, which totally holds up. Though what did I ever see in Jordan? Obviously, Ricky Vasquez, the real treasure here. I mentioned the show to my students who never know what I'm talking about. Yesterday, I said, "Hi, Sam," to my student Sam, and then made the guitar sound that accompanies Sam's ladder on Clarissa Explains It All. It stars Melissa Joan Hart, I explained. She's Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which also meant nothing. My students wear Doc Martens, but have never seen 90210. They do not understand Donna's father was literally Doc Martin. They did not cry when Luke Perry died. Though they know him from Riverdale, he's just the dad. He's not the most beautiful boy in the world. And I said, "Excuse me," Google imaged that white t-shirt, those sideburns, that slow smile. My job is to teach them. Thank you. I don't know. I have started writing more poems about my students and have found that as very joyful, which is great because previously I only wrote trauma, and I'm like, look at the whole window into more writing. And so here is another one about an encounter I had in a coffee shop just days ago. So this one's brand new. I've never read it before. It's called 40. That's my age, in case that last poem did not reveal that enough. Okay. Ordering tea from a former student, we discussed a concert she'd driven to Chicago to see. A band she thought I wouldn't know, a band I love. When I sat with my drink, she played their CD, and we smiled from across the room, from across the years. I came to this same coffee shop at her age, wrote behind the window, wondered if I'd marry, become a teacher, where I'd live. Strange to know those answers, like I know the answer to every question about my life, like I time traveled to find out. That one then led me to thinking about being that age, which I don't know about all of you, but I think about that constantly. And I think if I had any other job, I wouldn't, but I'm just constantly reminding myself what it was like to be a teenager, and just they say things and I'm like, oh, I feel that. It's very weird. So I'm going to read these two poems about my adolescent years. And also, this might be so tacky, but because they're going to be in Plowshares next year, which is my dream journal, I'm like, what's happening? What is this life? So I'm going to read them, and you can evaluate them and be like, anyone can get into Plowshares. This is what they're, I don't know. Or you'll be like, wow, that's great. That's the attitude I should have. All right, so here's one of them. It's called Speechless. First date, bowling alley. Poor choice, no chance to talk, one of us always taking a turn. When he bowled, his hip curved, same stance as when he played trumpet, school band where we met. After 2 games, still silent, we held hands in our center lane, the eye, movement all around us, bowlers, spinning orbs, disco night, music our parents might have danced to. So nervous, I couldn't talk. 5 weeks of me clearing my throat, then changing my mind. What to say? I love you. Why me? Why not Jessica or Aaron? I've only kissed one other boy who clearly taught me nothing. Our nightly phone call, daily cafeteria, 3 more dates, silence. Parking lot. He started the truck, February cold, fogged his cupped hands, turned to me. I accepted his kiss, returned to it years later, astral projection. In other relationships, when having sex and not wanting to, when pinned to a mattress on a living room floor, when being held by my throat in a doorway. He started the truck, his hand on my hair, proof nothing bad would happen in my life. And the other one about traumatic adolescent experiences is called A Man I Didn't Sleep With Asked What Word Defined Me. Beginning, I said, or becoming. He began dissecting my choice. No ing words, no developing or growing. Who are you now? Not who are you beginning to be? I began stammering. I didn't like not being believed, I knew that, even if I didn't know anything else about myself. I'd begun the day not knowing him. I began it at the coffee shop, heartbroken and eating a muffin, Mazzy Star accompanying the barista's sweeping, a lonely dance that took her to each corner of the room and nowhere else. He began it, asking a stranger to join him. I did. We began talking, or I began talking and he began correcting. Subtly, but I noticed. I just didn't like myself enough to stop him. Lunch, a walk, dinner. He looked a little like Ryan Phillippe if Ryan Phillippe had a mohawk. Somehow we ended up in his apartment, in his bed. We began kissing, but that's all. Summer, but I wore long sleeves, jeans, sneakers, armor, already weary at 20. He asked to take a picture of me naked. I said no. I found that flattering, but I don't now, looking back. He called the next day, the next. I let the phone ring. I was beginning. I was becoming. He didn't know me at all. And then my last poem is a happy poem. I think like you bring them down, you bring them back up. It's the whole journey. And so this one, I'm constantly trying to write the present now. Like that's my current goal because I feel like so much of my poetry is like dwelling on the past. So here's a poem that I literally wrote. Like I was just writing down what happened as it happened. Some of these things you might be like, did that really happen as you were writing it? Yes, it did. It did. All right. So it's called In Our Small House, Only a Wall Separates Us. In the kitchen, my husband replaces the faucet, sprayer coiled like a can of snakes. I strain to hear his movements. He's working quietly because I'm building something too. This line and this one. The space between. Sometimes I diminish my work, not practical at all, looking out the window and guessing incorrectly what our neighbor will pull from his trunk. A box of Corona. The split screen of my husband now spackling a small hole in the wall and our neighbor lining bottles in the fridge. My husband doesn't drink as he used to 19 years ago when we met. Then he punctuated every sentence with a cigarette. People assume our reason for being childless, living like we're 20 forever. But oatmeal for breakfast, stretches before bed, subtitled TV, we have settled comfortably into 40. Our neighbors our age, sometimes he drinks while his children spring from the trampoline into the sky. We wave as we all sit to dinner in our backyards. My husband cooks every night a poem we can eat. After I wash dishes in our new sink. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you, Melissa. And people just reminded me to turn on the transcript by talking about subtitles. I apologize that it wasn't on for those first two readings. So we had donuts and then we had muffins. So now who knows what we're going to get next. Our third wonderful reader is Matthew Henry. Matthew, it's all yours.
Now I'm searching for a poem that has food in it. Thank you all for being here, and I'm feeling like I'm going to read depressing poems. They're all from my news collection, The Colored Page. But since I have a captive audience, I'm going to read poems that are teacher-centered, and these are largely poems I haven't read out loud before. So this will be interesting. And for those who don't know, this is a semi-autobiographical journey through my life, being, as one of my students said, a raisin in a bowl of milk, usually being the only Black or brown face, either as student or as teacher. And right now, I think I'm the only Black male as a teacher in our district because the other one left. Yeah. Classical conditioning. We sit in our newly minted desks, Melvin, Matthew, and Matt. Only 3 years from retirement, she finds our names difficult to distinguish. We bear no family resemblance. 2 are Black, 1 is white. When a question is asked and more than one of our hands are raised, we're never sure which she wants, unless she's smiling. Jumping ahead in time, this poem, a lot of the collection takes its tone from Langston Hughes's theme for English B, and this poem's entitled Essay for History B. I'm not a duly elected representative of niggerdom who's authorized to speak for all of my people everywhere, but that's exactly how you see me, expecting House Negro hands to eagerly rise and raise and answer your every classroom's question, to play mammy and educate masses' children, to do your job in the shortest month, or when topics turn to Atlantic currents, brown sugar and people, Harriet and Sojourner, Booker T and W.E.B., Malcolm and Martin, Biggie and Tupac. You see me when convenient, when you want me to drink your 2% curriculum, say thank you and smile showing all my teeth. But when I won't consent to be your magic Negro, when I raise my hand to discuss the beast on my block, the knees which find our backs for walking in your neighborhood, the pistols pointed center mass because my father's taillight was out, you silence me with threats of slipping grades or calling Officer Whitman, without seeing how this too sings of America. Sometimes it seems you do not want to be a part of me or learn from me, younger and Black and somewhat less free. You should know the feeling is mutual. This one is entitled, We All Have to Make Sacrifices. I need to get myself in character for this one. All right, that'll make sense in a moment. We all have to make sacrifices. Another Black-clad, brown-haired white boy has shot up his school, 40 miles away, 2 counties over, but it's my name and picture they've laminated, noosed about my neck. I'll waste an extra 20 minutes every morning to prove I bear the name my mother gave me, am not one of the other God-tanned she can't tell apart. Chastised for talking in line, for moving too slow by a matronly bouncer at the worst club in town. You need to have your ID ready. Have you never been to an airport? Probably not. Her doubtful eyes flicker between my face and the plastic facsimile in her hands, changing the angle, catching the light 14 times, once for every bullet that disrupted class, was sent home in bone and blood, asking, Why you people can't just keep your hair consistent with what's in the photo? It should be a law. Before wondering if my sigh is reasonable suspicion to search my book bag, because you never know. But every day, I'm the one holding everybody up, stopping them from getting an education. After a final squint, my algebra teacher from last semester will shove back my lanyard, shoo me along, and greet Haley with a smile, comfortable knowing she's doing her part to keep us all safe. This one's entitled 12 Minutes a Slave. One of the interesting things about like reading from this collection is people asking me like, what's real, what's not real? And I've already had the awkward people coming up to me and saying, is that me in that poem? And sometimes going, yeah, we haven't talked about that in decades. Let's do that now, sure. So this actually did happen, this poem. No one ever believes it. 12 Minutes a Slave. We held a slave auction in class today. Probably not a state-sanctioned component of AP US history, but Mr. S made a block out of the front row desks, cornered it off with backwards-facing chairs. He shame-forced Tony Miller above us, introduced him as item number 5. He prepared a catalog, a one-sided sepia sheet with Tony's description and a starting price. Before the bidding, Mr. S made Tony turn in perfect circles so we could all see what we were getting. Made him show his gums and teeth, roll up his sleeves and flex, lift an Oxford unabridged over his head and strain for as long as he could. We were encouraged to holler, not yell, intrusive questions about Tony's pedigree and prior owners, to discuss if he was better suited for house or field, to speculate about breeding options. After Tony climbed down, unable to meet our eyes or the oppressive silence, I was almost ashamed that a white teacher treating one of his own like this made my brown skin rattle with the joy of falling chains. I'll just read 2 more that I sort of think are funny, but that just shows how jaded I am. This was the email that I didn't send because I like my job. Regarding thoughts on the latest racial incidents. On behalf of all your Black colleagues, the 3 of us you can name and the other 4 you mistake us for, allow me to thank all of you for crafting such heartfelt emails. The time it took for you to skim the initial call to consider the impact of racial terror on our students and then string together your 5-sentence missives must have been so mentally taxing. We thank you collectively for your comments on how courageous you felt her message was. We thank you for your congratulations on how surprisingly articulate she was in writing. We thank you for all the emotions you couldn't capture, but still somehow managed to send. How tragic the events, how we are all suffering equally. We thank you for the apologies for past silence and complicity, your vows to do better the next time you truly doubt will ever come. Mostly our ebony monolith thanks you for the bravery it took to specifically address your email to one person, but then reply all to the entire faculty and staff. Oh, how your virtue waves before us like semaphore flags, guiding fighter pilots back to the deck. How each new notification chimes or resounds like gunshots at close quarters. And the last one I will read is, I never read out loud because it is actually an acrostic poem. So those who, if you haven't bought the book yet, then go buy it. I won't tell you what the acrostic says. That's, yeah, I just thought of that. All right. It's called An Open Letter to the Public School Employee Worried That Anti-Racist is Too Controversial a Term. I'm going to read the title again because this really happened. An open letter to the public school employees worried that anti-racist is too controversial a term. Some days I believe the number of first cousins holding hands in a marital bed is dwindling, an illusion upended when you speak. I hope hand soap lights your face on fire and the only available suppressant is a dull fork. I hope termites lay oblong eggs in your pubic hair and hone their taste for unwashed flesh. I hope your children choose your elder care options from an old 60 Minutes expose and find your savings the perfect seed money for investing in underwater solar panels. I hope happiness is a football, that you're Charlie Brown and time is Lucy. I hope your cat leaves, your kite strings always break, and ravens remember your eyes. I hope you'll understand how you sound. I hope you'll realize this poem is an acrostic, a noose waiting to tilt your neck and act accordingly. Thank you.
Wow, 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 wow. If you don't have the book, please get it. Also Melissa's book, which is called Green, and Jared's book, which is coming out next year. Make a list. You're going to want them all. Thank you so much to those three wonderful writers and teachers for being our featured poets. But now you still get to hear from 8 more people, which is exciting. And each of those poets will read 2 poems or take 5 minutes, whichever they choose to do. And I'm just going to, again, introduce them by name. And they're going to share their work with you. And you will see that the talent of teacher writers is unlimited. And we're going to start with Moriah Cohen.
Hey, everybody. That is a really hard act to follow, so I want to just start there. Thank you, Jared and Melissa and Matthew. You all did wonderful, and I'm really happy to be reading with you. And thank you, everybody else, for spending your Tuesday evening honoring both teachers and poetry. So my first poem is called Scriptio Inferior, and it refers to the idea of palimpsest. So in antiquity, parchment was really expensive, and so oftentimes old manuscripts would be reused with the original writing scraped or washed away. And Scriptio Inferior is the term for the traces of original writing. At the museum, a red-headed woman stretches rinsed goat skin inside birch frame, clipping a soft border along the skin's coast, an island drawn taut, the knife a moon, the way it shaves imperfection. In Middle Ages, when words were not worth parchment they were written on, scribes replaced the floating screws of ox and house, the rust line of rustling velvet, of palm and soul upturned with liturgy. All along the exhibit, skin turns a field of hide, husk. Days dilate and contract, a world writing over them in granite ridges, a tree scattered trail, kids ascend to smoke themselves moth-like. The parts of them all soul eclipsing geometries of farmland driven outward, abandoned scripts of clump and dirt and till they leave behind. It is no easier a decade later to look at the ring my future ex-husband slinked from his pocket saying nothing and warn that girl to walk. It can take the walls of a mortgage crowbarred open, all the cutleries thrown, the body turning cage to accept an invitation from the self that says, sit down a minute. What you love is not the man, but the unearthing of form. Sometimes I walk through weeks, sure I am pinned open for everyone to read my most fluttering regrets. What lies beside curious hand, interposing lamp and thorn scrawl, the labor of translation, hunchback and hungry, I merciful as it deciphers shit and mud without flinching. Yes, it is its own kind of love. All right, so I have one more for you. And oftentimes when I write, if I find myself stuck, it's because I realize that I don't have the right form to match the content. So this poem is a palindrome poem, so it can be read the same forward and backward. And I like to imagine it as a person staring at his or her reflection in the water. And it's called Reflection on My Frustration with Living in the Present. And it's dedicated to yellow star thistle, which is a barbed flower that they have out in California. And I was there last year while they were, much like this year, suffering from fire and drought. And I was just reflecting on that. reflection on my frustration with living in the present. If the yellow floret is a harbinger, then it is a harbinger I follow over train tracks, unbraiding its lattice, a buckle of stems barbed and sprawling. We covet nature's patterns, the river keeps its distance. We covet nature's patterns, the river keeps its distance, a buckle of stems barbed and sprawling, I follow over train tracks, unbraiding its lattice. If the yellow floret is a harbinger, then it is a harbinger. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Moriah. Beautiful sounds and music in your poems. Love it. I was just thinking, like, this is kind of like having a dessert cart, like at a fancy restaurant. You've had your meal and now you get like these just little tastes of everything, and then you want more of everything you have. Our next reader is going to be one of our features from last year, Jessica Cuello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Donna. I love this group of teacher poets. Even if I haven't met you, I love you. It's such a pleasure. I'm going to read one book from Lyre. I'm sorry if you've heard it, but this is my book. It came out in October. And then I'm going to read one short new poem. My babysitter, Karen B., who was sent to Willard Asylum. There are only 2 photos of me as a child. She took them, she had no child. She had cool cigarettes and a job at the drugstore. She gave me the Crayola box with the built-in sharpener. 400 suitcases were stored in the attic of Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. She joined her twin brother there. She wore her black hair down. A child could admire it. She bought me an Easter basket, a stuffed rabbit whose fur rubbed off. She walked everywhere. She painted circles of blush on her cheeks. Loony, people said so. I mean grown-ups who saw signs, who passed her on our street before she started to call and say, remember. On the phone, she said, remember. Remember the date we killed her brother, forgetting he'd been committed. I took her hand and tagged along like an animal. She was perfect to a child. In 1995, when the asylum closed, an artist took photos of the 400 suitcases. The photos were put online, the contents laid out respectfully. In the open suitcases, belts, pocket knives, Lone Ranger cards, keys, ribbons, shoe polish, mirrors, pills, a fountain pen, bottle of glycerin, a zither, kit of needles, bread ration card, the Gospel of John, a letter. Each suitcase had a name: Lena C., Lillian L., Mary T., Gloria P., Cassie M., Francis T., Marion R., Catherine S., Dimitri Z., Ruby C., Anthony C., FJL, Viola G., Alice T., Carrie L., Karen B., remember. That may be my we were talking about greatest hits at the beginning. People really like that poem, so I'm going to call it my greatest hits. I am going to read a brand new poem too that I wrote in July, and it's here goes. The Free Bangles concert at the State Fair. Susanna Hoffs was hot and I liked to watch her lips sing. I'd never been to a concert and I jumped up and down. My ponytail brushed the girl behind me. Bitch, I will light your hair on fire. The girl held her lighter up to the tip of my hair. I pulled her ire into me, the ire against weakness. I knew ire. She was my familiar, my smallest self, and I took her into my body and kept her, the whole concert, the way I knew to do. And the girl flicked her lighter all night, waving it wildly, except during Manic Monday, a song by Prince that he gave away, a song the girl kind of danced to, a little sadly, as if she was unsure what it meant, the sadness or the song.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I love when people read these new poems. I'm like, these don't sound like new poems. These sound like poems that are absolutely completed. Our next reader is going to be Meghan Dunn.
Thank you so much. I can't remember, Don, I think you were saying this at the beginning, that it can sometimes feel like you're the only one out here doing this work and trying to be a writer as well. So I just really value the time and also the knowledge that all of you are doing this work. I'm going to read two poems from my book, which is called Curriculum. It came out in March 2021. The first poem comes from the perspective of a teacher, and the second one from an adolescent. Grammar lesson. After school, Carl asks me to read an essay he's written about walking with his father in Haiti when he was 6. They walked to the port after church, the sun hot on their bare heads, his father pausing to wipe his face with a red handkerchief. When they arrived, there were men shouting, running, men with machetes, which they waved in the air above their heads. He and his father hid behind a fruit stand, its counter heaped high with mangoes and plantains, and his father covered Carl's ears, but he saw people lying on the ground. People's heads, he wrote, were lying on the ground too. Is this real? I ask, and he nods. Small for his age, thin and frail, his neck seems too slender to support his head, his long lashed eyes. This should be possessive, I say. The heads belong to the people. In a different version of this story, he looks back at me. Not anymore, he says. In a different version of this story, I listen. In that version, his head isn't bowed over the paper. As I lift my red pen to the page, add the small machete swoop of the apostrophe. And then this is the last poem in the book. I was trying for a very long time to write about this experience, and this is sort of how it all came together. Because I fainted during the Miracle of Life video in 7th grade. I never saw the birth, and no one would describe it to me when I emerged from the nurse's office. The other girls giggling knowingly, their hands to their mouths, while the ice pack I held pressed to the nape of my neck melted into the loose ends of my ponytail. I had to imagine it instead. I pictured a tunnel, the color of my flushed cheeks, the smooth cool of the linoleum against my face, the murmur of the class coming into focus around me. I didn't know where the tunnel went or why, but I knew it was something miraculous, something to change me. Years later, it was light when I got on the train, and when we emerged from the tunnel, it was dark. We were on the bridge, high above the river, the air frozen on the train windows in shattered circles, my face looking back at me from the glass, lines around my eyes like little knives. I was old. My whole life had happened already. But somewhere in the reflection was the girl returning to class. The nurse's office pass crumpled in her damp palm, waiting to be filled in, to learn what she'll give birth to, not knowing yet it's herself. Over and over again, the pain cresting and falling, pushing and crying out until she holds herself, bloodied in her arms finally, the miracle she's been waiting for. Thank you so much. Really a pleasure to be here.
Wow. I feel like that was kind of a partner poem to Melissa's. It's strange how that happens sometimes in readings, when we hear these echoes of other people's work. And so we still have 5 more people to go, and I'm so excited. Our next reader is Michael Garrigan. Michael.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored and grateful to be here around such amazing teachers and writers. Since it's summer vacation, I've been spending a lot of time on the river. So I'm going to read 2 river poems. This first one's called The River Dark. It was published in Rust and Moth a couple months ago. The river, by the way, I mean, is the Susquehanna River, which is, yeah, anyway. So this is The River Dark. We walked the tracks in the dark with a 6-pack and lit camel lights as flashlights and bug dope. Chicken livers and sharp hooks jostle in tackle boxes down to the abandoned mill, Billmeyer. And the quarry, its quartz swimming pool blue water held back by rock. We sit on the white cliff calm piles and say we are fishing for catfish, but just smoke a whole pack and get a buzz from cheap beer. Sometimes I think we are still sitting, smoke melting the night to our fingers and lips. Sometimes I think that we went there in a dream that is still living in the sleeping body of our youth. Sometimes I think we fell in love with the dark river, turning our backs to the dawn, keeping its faint orange spread in the corner of our eyes, watching it chase our gods underwater. So is The River Dark. One of the main threads of my next book, River Amen, which is going to be coming out next April, is an attempt of reclaiming my Catholic faith in some way and figuring out what that faith looks like for me now. And one way in which I do this is that I started writing my own liturgies. And so I'm going to read a liturgy that I wrote. It was in the Tahoma Literary Review. It's called Liturgy of Carp Becoming a God. Find an island thick with knotweed and 2 white egrets stalking shallows. Wade downstream along the bank, pausing every few feet to let the river show you how to be. To make sure that the rocks and ledges you see are what they are and not what you want them to be. Climb over the trunk of a lightning-struck river birch, look into water, and you are still. Let your eyes adjust and find a school of 7 large carp brushing their scales against sunken branches. Breathe until you begin to blend. Slowly kneel until knees hit soft sediment that's soaked for most of the year, but it's August and the river is thirsty. And these carp, they are shuffling like stalks of corn in morning wind, and everything moves as if we're caught in a hidden riverland hymn. And you are still. Follow their rhythms until you notice they are taking turns swimming into the deep channel to suck down little damselfly nymphs, letting water usher them into the shallow end of the pool where they feel it slow and scoot quick up under the deadfall, waiting their turn, and your fingers are in the water, reaching for their tails, hoping to touch one since you can't seem to land one with your fly rod. And now your palm is wet and you brush off the memory of a wafer turned into body and amen, and a long walk back to your pew. As the next carp takes its turn, you slide your whole arm in and let it become water, and you are still. And having breathed in a few seconds, and you think you finally found the right words to build a prayer that will be heard. And when you exhale, they notice you, because that's what gods do. Notice, and they dart off into deep current, and your palms are left open, and once sediment settles, you consider sliding your whole body into water to become a river prayer flag forever caught in current. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So we have at least 2 books right now to look forward to in 2023, maybe more coming up. Really excited to hear more of your work. And our next reader, moving right along, I can tell this is a teacher reading because everybody's exactly on time. Our next reader is Frances Klein.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here. I am going to read 2, one that is a stone cold bummer and then one that is a little lighter. So I'm going to start with one that I think those of you that are teachers are familiar with: the kid who wanders in during passing period, confesses their deepest traumas, and then walks away to leave you to deal with it. So I am going to start with one called Secondary Trauma. The girl from fourth period shows me her molar, jagged, cracked, abscess yellow as flax. I have an identical one, upper 14, left quadrant. We use hand mirrors to compare them, their color and breakage, the way they jut into our sinuses, leaving us sleepless. After careful evaluation, she stretches her jaw wide, grasps the tooth securely with thumb and forefinger and pulls until the gum bed relinquishes its captive, until her breath nestles hot in the hollow. She does not make a sound. Lunch is over. She sets the tooth on the desk as she leaves, and it rolls, dots a bloody ellipse on the mock wood surface. I drop it into my pocket, hear it clink against the jawline I am building, unwilling. My husband wants me to see a specialist. He says I grind my teeth at night. And then the other one that I'm going to read is from my chapbook that came out earlier this year. It is called In the Bower, the Roses Hang So Heavy. I am depressed, and wait, a poem can't just say I am depressed. The poem has to be coy and oblique. For God's sake, it has to be literary. The reader should leave the poem wondering if it is about depression. They should say to a friend, here, read this poem about depression, and have the friend disagree, since the poem seems to be much more about two fish, or a diner going out of business, or Brexit. The poem should be cutting, incisive. It should expose the ugly underbelly of society. Yet the poem should also be beautiful, should describe leaning against the cool glass of the car window, tracing the path of a lone raindrop. The chill condensation should be crafted with such crystalline clarity that the reader is left thinking that depression can't be all that bad if a depressed person can write a poem like that. For contrast, the poem about depression should have lots of light in it. Early morning light, midday light, anything except the waning twilight of evening, which is too on the nose. In a pinch, the poem about depression can go outside, although it doesn't really feel up to it. The poem can gather plants for its metaphors, can braid a crown of ivy for the green it lends to the lines the poem has about envy, about lying motionless on the lawn while the grass grows around it. Ideally, the poem will also include one devastating stanza about a bower of white roses, although it doesn't know where it will find one, and the botanical garden closes early on Sundays, and getting there means pants and glasses and keys, and oh God, it's so much simpler to just put on Grey's Anatomy and write about the bower later, maybe. When the poem about depression ends, it should be on a hopeful note because no one likes a whiner. The poem should end at sunrise, or on a new budding branch, or on a bacterial culture persevering on the dishes in the sink that should have been washed a week ago. By no means should the poem simply end by refusing to change its bra and taking the whole sleeve of Oreos to bed, but it will anyway. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. I love both of those. The ending of that second one was so great. I am just blown away by everybody here. And I mean, we got 3 readers left, and I don't think there'll be any exception. Our next reader is going to be Joan Kwon Glass. Joan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I thought I was going to read certain poems, and then I completely changed my mind because I feel very comfortable and safe with everyone in this group. So I'm going to read some effed up poems. But because my presses would kill me if I didn't, these are my books. If you want to buy them, I'm not reading poems from either of them. But, you know, buy them anyway. This is Night Swim at Diode Editions. And this one just came out. Oh, no, this is Matthew's book. I did not write this because I could not have. I'm just reading it, so it's on my desk. This is If Rust Could Grow on the Moon through Milk and Cake Press. Okay, so I'm going to read a poem that has not found a publisher yet, and I'm not sure why it hasn't. because I had a lot of feeling writing it. It's called Monica, and it's about being an Asian American, mixed race Asian American teacher in a school where like 99% of my students are white, except for like a smattering of other Asian kids who just constantly look terrified. So this is Monica. Today, my students brainstorm current events for research papers. Hashtag Stop Asian Hate comes up in discussion just as the bell rings, and a boy turns around in his chair, pulls his eyelids long and flat, grins at Monica, the only Chinese student in my class. He darts out of the room and into the crowded hallway before I can stop him. When I take Monica aside and ask if she's okay, say I will talk to him, make sure he never does that to her again, she shrugs and says, "It's really okay, I'm used to it." I spend my lunch period remembering the first time a pair of white boys made Asian eyes at me in kindergarten, dancing around chanting ching chong, ching chong. An unfamiliar shame rises to my skin's surface alongside a silent eruption of hot tears. An even deeper silent fortitude comes after. It never leaves, and later in life becomes a fortress. In our team meeting, I bring up the incident to the 5 white teachers, hoping for feedback, hoping for a plan to make it right. But instead, they want to talk about the seating chart, ways to improve the classroom environment, specifically to keep the worst behaved boys far enough away from each other to make things manageable for everyone. Someone suggests Monica as a buffer. We could seat her between the boys to temper them. Another teacher nods in agreement, says, "Oh yes, that's perfect. I'm sure she won't mind." Okay. One second. This next one, I think a couple people in here have read when I was looking for feedback. And it was just accepted at Prairie Schooner. I'm sorry, not at Prairie Schooner, at Chestnut Review. It's called Last Communion. Here I am, kneeling again before a man who tells me I can be holy while insisting that nothing is permanent, not even my precious sins. I am washed in the blood, longing for something sacred, tongue hanging over my bottom lip like a dog. I like to read between the lines of obituaries, try to guess what their family members left out on purpose. You can tell a lot by what isn't there. For example, vague obit of healthy teenager, death by overdose. 50-year-old mom who was a brave warrior, breast cancer. 30-year-old male, donations to NAMI in lieu of flowers, suicide. My sister was an asshole, and now she's dead. Though her life ended at 37, I wrote her eulogy as though she died at age 9, because that was the last time she wasn't an asshole, and I wanted to say something true without pissing everyone off. Here's the thing. If all we have to do to erase our gravest mistakes is take communion or stop breathing one day, what is keeping us from making them all, from relishing each one, knowing in the end, they will not define us? When I die, please tell everyone the truth about me. that I walked around this place believing I was a little better than most, that twice I turned away from true love out of pride, revered books more than men, that I did, in fact, have a favorite child. While you're at it, reveal this truth about us all, that each of us has secrets we take to the grave, things we want to admit, but are certain no one wants to hear. Tell them that the very last time I ever took communion, I closed my lips around the priest's finger, let him feel my hot tongue against his skin, and he let me. Thank you for being my safe place.
Wow, 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 wow. Amazing. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything less than amazing from Joan, but you get two poems that aren't in her books. And they are not fucked up. They are pretty great. We have 2 readers left, so we're just going to continue because we're on a good time trajectory here to keep everyone happy. Our next reader, our penultimate reader, is Mitchell Nobis,
who is currently furious that he has to follow Joan. I'm gonna do a callback to the. I don't know that I have any greatest hits, so I decided I should read a poem about greatest hits. This was in Moist Poetry Journal, June, recently. It's called "I'd Rather Be." I'd rather be. The small blue Nissan ahead of me at the stoplight has a plastic license plate holder that says, "I'd rather be at a Rick Springfield concert." And buddy, wouldn't we all rather be catching a tan in the summertime lawn seats at some amphitheater off the highway, wearing sunglasses to protect our eyes from the sun and the gleam of Rick's professional teeth, watching his wavy dyed brown septuagenarian goatee frame his mouth as it sings Jesse's Girl, with his mind on autopilot, wondering what he'll have for dinner later as he croons, "Where can I find a woman like that?" for the 100,000th time, as we dream of this life we're in for the 100,000th time, instead of cubicles and gray, the beige hallways we walk for decades before demise. We dream, relaxed in the warm air we ignore for another decade, as some gulls try to steal fries from a couple who are busy groping their 50-something bodies. Their bodies, here still, soft and alive, sagging in the lawn, but 15 again and lost in their friend's basement again, making out on the beanbag in the corner, frantic in hazy after-school limbo before the friend's parents get home from work. They knock over what's left of a margarita in a can. It trickles green through the grass as Rick's band cuts straight to the opening riff for Love Somebody. The drummer pounds the toms, the thuds summoning 1984 as the guitar chimes and the harmonies swoop in and swallow the heating air. You better love somebody, it's late. The frogs evaporating in the wetlands by the off-ramp. End of that one. I am not normally a big intro guy, but life feels kind of bleak a lot lately. And I used to do a lot of advocating for the National Writing Project. Teacher writers, shout out to the National Writing Project, professional development group for teachers of writing, changed my life. I used to do some advocating for them. They would get a fraction of funding from the federal level. And I don't like giving too much intro because I feel like if a poem doesn't stand on its own, it's not done. But I do want to say, since we're all teachers here, I came up off the metro into the post-Parkland shooting protest. Thousands of teenagers standing up for their lives. Very powerful moment. This year, a couple of friends teach my poems, which is also just incredible. Like, what an amazing thing when somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, I taught your poem." Like, that's also life-changing. One of his students, unbeknownst to him, Googled me and reached out via my website to tell me that this poem helped get her through this last year. And I'm not a big weepy guy, but I kind of choke up a little even just saying that. So I don't know. She reached out confidentially. I don't want to say her name. "Hey, kiddo, this one's for you." This was in Wine Cellar Press sometime last year. It's called Monumental. I stepped off the metro in March to a sea of teenagers still holding their signs. I'll miss my friends more than you'll miss your guns. Their faces alive with voice, their eyes beacons of belief. The students straggled toward home, the protest over. They walked past monuments to war and to warriors. 35 children and teachers have been torn to death by bullets at school this year. It's not yet summer. Seniors graduate today. The children hollered at the Capitol, brandished slogans, protect us, not guns, openly carried their signs high above their heads, packing words with pride. In 2013, the Advanced Placement English Language and Composition exam asked students to write an essay that would examine the factors a group or agency should consider in memorializing an event or person and in creating a monument. I walked down the mall as students marched away past monuments to war, to war, to war, holding their signs. The scariest thing in a school should be my grades. 476,277 students wrote an essay that year explaining what's worth memorializing, what merits a monument. This year, 35 kids and teachers died, shot at school, more Americans dead at school than war. But who's at war really? We have enlisted grunts without their permissions or 16th birthdays. Examine the factors a group or agency should consider in memorializing an event or person and in creating a monument. I've never really thought about that before, the students said, but they have now, as they laugh together, ready to bury yesterday for tomorrow. Thank you an insane amount for including me tonight.
Wow, those were incredible. Thank you so much. And believe it or not, the night has flown by and we are on our last reader. And I will then introduce to you Leah Umansky.
Thank you, Donna. All right, I guess I'm the last reader. That's what you get when you have a U name, right? Teachers know that. So I'm reading new work as well. And thank you to Jared and Donna. It's so awesome to be a part of this again. And so exciting to hear all these other poets. This is a new poem called This is a Place Where We've All Been Wounded, that's out now in the New Poetry Wales. In the place where I've been wounded, there is still a possibility. There is still a possible thing wounded and throbbing in waste, in loss, in shatter. Or maybe it is in breath, in blood, waiting in hope, longing with beauty, for time, for tomorrow, for alignment, a line, a heartbeat, a wavelength, a rope thrown, ready for the pull. I am ready for the pull. I trust myself. I give myself this world, this page, this heart. I give myself this day, this hour, this moment. The Greek word for beauty comes from the word for calling. Do you hear me calling? Is it beautiful where you are? And tomorrow, on that shoreline, tomorrow I am calling you. Is it beautiful? And in April, I tried to write really short poems, short for me, meaning like under 15 lines. So I might read one, I might read two. They're both kind of short. Upon looking at a dwarf starburst and feeling melancholy. Both night and day, each carry the light, one overhand and the other under, nestled or spread, cupping or coupling in a curvature of color, a caricature of sky. A friend says the birthstone of the month is the moon, and I love that. I prepare for this life with heart and imagination, and the joy I collect, that light. And you know, when you look at images from the Hubble telescope, not only are they extraordinary, but ordinary. So ordinary, yet they are real. And this too is real. The struggle of being extraordinary, of being so singular, yet unremarkable. So fire, I am cool, I am ice. And I'll end with this one, which was inspired by poetry. It's called When Ocean Vuong Says You Can Be a Poet Tonight at the 92nd Street Y. I let that joy stun me as I race out into a cab that drives past the Met Gala on Fifth Avenue. I ooh and ah out the window, and my driver asks, what? And I say, you know, that fancy party at the Met. And he laughs, not expecting me to say fancy. And I say, someday, as he smiles in the mirror, saying, yes, someday, you never know. You never know, I say back, thinking, you never know what a day could bring. In one day, in this month, I have 2 friends living parallel lives. One suddenly in the ICU needing brain surgery, and another in London having a baby boy needing immediate open heart surgery after his birth. I think about this life, and then I think this poem and how this poem reads you back. It is doing that now, saying, Leah, be grateful. Everything in life is timing, everything. Let things happen to you. And then I think about the goslings I saw by the river, Mama Goose and Papa Goose nearby, both watching me, watching them, and the sun stunning above, watching us all over the passive lawn against the river's shine. And I listen to a podcast, and I listen with my eyes, watching, and I listen. It's not just the joy that connects us, but the sadness too. And I think, isn't that what makes a life? Isn't that what makes a poem? Yes, Leah, yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, everybody, so much for participating this evening. I think that's a great note for us to end on. It's been so wonderful to just be in this space with all of you and to know not only your beautiful writing, but to recognize how lucky the kids that are in front of you in your classrooms are to have you as teachers, as people who know how to take risks and how to care for others. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then you can feel free to turn your mics on, say hello, whatever you would like to do. Thank you so much for coming. If you were part of the audience that wasn't reading, we appreciate you being here. And good luck to everyone starting their school year soon. And hopefully we will have another one of these in 2023. Don't forget to buy all those books.